So IndyCar made a pretty shocking announcement a couple of days ago that they will indeed be following the trend that most of major motorsport is, that they will be moving to hybrid engines for the new regulations. Now, the plan is to keep the same basic configuration like they have been planning on using to go to continue to use turbocharged V6 engines that are slightly bored out from what they are now, with a target between the turbocharger, the internal combustion engine, as well as the hybrid system to combine to make 900 horsepower. And also they announced that they are pushing the date of the new regulations, which I would assume also includes a chassis, though they haven't specifically said that yet, to 2022. The original due date was 2021. And the reaction was fairly typical, as you'd expect. It was mixed, especially with an announcement like this, especially after there was talk that they weren't going to use a hybrid, which is something I'm going to get into a little bit later. But having a couple days to kind of mull it over and think about it, I wanted to give you my thoughts because I think I'm a little bit against the trend, as I usually am, but I think that's why you guys watch me. But there were some things, and there are some concerns that I have about hybrids going forward. Now, first of all, I do want to say it would be very hypocritical of me to 100% paint this as a bad move for IndyCar, specifically because of what all kind of transpired right before the Indianapolis 500, where it looked like Porsche was going to be a shoo-in as the third IndyCar manufacturer. And then details started to emerge that Porsche had taken a very serious look at IndyCar, but because there wasn't any kind of electrification within the engine, kind of in this post-Dieselgate world for a Volkswagen-owned company, they need that bit of marketing to be able to justify to their board of directors to go racing. Understandable. But IndyCar was holding hard and fast to their fast and loud kind of mantra that they've had. And I can't remember. I'm pretty sure I read articles that quoted folks like Jay Fry at IndyCar that said they were not planning on going with hybrid electric power for this new regulation, which is why it's so surprising that they have decided, and to be honest with you, so late in the game, that they're going to make this big change. And ultimately, and again, I'm going to come off sounding like a cynic. I apologize if that's, if that really turns you off, but to me, this feels like it feels like a knee jerk, really. It feels like IndyCar had a hard and fast plan, and suddenly now they've decided to not stick to it. And it seems, again, looking at it from the outside with the information that we have, it looks an awful lot like you got told no by Porsche. You understood why Porsche told you no, but now you're going to change the regulations in the way that would have gotten Porsche after they've already said no. So, and this is the thing that I'm kind of scratching my head on for several reasons. So there were a few IndyCar-related social media accounts that either used the hashtag or made the claim that this was innovation. And innovation, for some of you younger fans, is something that we used to argue about quite a bit in like 2008, around post-merger between Champ Car and the Indy Racing League. And that was when everybody was talking about what were the kind of core elements, what were the things that made IndyCar so popular right before the split, so like 95, 94, and then you could even go back to some of the other boom periods in the 60s. What were the great elements of IndyCar racing? And innovation was one of those things. Innovation, of course, was stuff like the turbine cars that Andy Granatelli brought, where they would put a helicopter engine into a race car and try to run that at the Indianapolis 500. Almost won the race, eventually got nerfed. And then you can look at 1994 with the Beast motor, where USAC wrote rules that were supposed to help small-time operations like Michael Greenfield or Lee Brayton build engines, or John Menard, even though he's richer than Roger Penske, build engines to put in race cars to make Indianapolis more accessible. Well, what it did was allow Roger Penske to exploit the loophole in the rule to create a 1,000 horsepower motor that was only allowed to run at Indianapolis. Things like that was kind of one of the things that a lot of people talked about. And so it makes me kind of chuckle to see this the innovation thing kind of be claimed. Excuse me, but this is the year 2019. Exactly what is innovative about a hybrid motor? Like, seriously, if you look across motorsport, Formula One has had electrification since 2009 with KERS. I think McLaren and Ferrari, there might have been another team, maybe Renault also tried it that season, but I know for a fact that both McLaren and Ferrari tried KERS, and then eventually it became, I think around 2011, 2010, 2011, 2012, it became virtually mandatory. I think only the Cosworth engines didn't use a KERS system. And then finally, by the time you get to 2014, they've gone to twin turbocharged V6 hybrids. So if you think about, Formula One has had this technology integrated into their series since just right after the open wheel merger in the United States. And so to me, I look at this and say, okay, so if you think you're being innovative, what manufacturer would be intrigued by this formula that hasn't been intrigued by Formula One over the last decade? What entices a manufacturer to come in now to IndyCar and not there? And then you look at also the World Endurance Championship, another kind of equivalent series to IndyCar in terms of world prestige. And, you say what you will about the LMP1 hybrid regulations, and certainly there is a lot to be said about the sustainability of those regulations. Ultimately, they attracted 4 manufacturers. Now, whether or not the rules makers wrote rules that were sustainable or rules that were able to, retain those manufacturers is another thing to be discussed. And of course, again, Dieselgate did not help because 2 of the manufacturers that were under a certain, banner had to leave one way or the other, not necessarily because of the regulations. And one manufacturer is still in there. And then you look at Formula One, and with their current regulations, everybody complains about the cost, but there are still 4 engine manufacturers, Renault, Ferrari, Mercedes, and Honda, that produce engines for that series. So, I mean, again, and here's the other thing that I kind of think to myself is, would Porsche, having said no, does that mean they are now suddenly willing to come back? And if not Porsche, then who? Who are the manufacturers who see value in this versus see value in Formula E? And then think about this, the deadline is coming up. I mean, in terms of being able to produce a competitive racing engine, and one that is now integrating some, fairly new technology. Obviously, hybrids aren't necessarily totally new, but this is going to be a new way of going IndyCar racing. And one of the manufacturers is going to get it right, and one of them is going to get it wrong. Despite the fact that it's a spec system, I suspect that there's going to be some advantage to be found for one of the manufacturers. I'm sure there's going to be some loophole somewhere where a manufacturer will be able to exploit some of that potential out of that electric unit. And so Honda and Chevy have such a huge advantage because they've obviously, I'm sure they have already been developing their what was supposed to be the 2021 engine, and now they have to redevelop it to include a hybrid system, but that still puts them well ahead of the game of anybody who would be jumping in at this late of a date. And so ultimately we get down to kind of the brass tacks of what I'm getting at, and that is that I think IndyCar has kind of been stuck in the past when thinking about these regulations. I said it at the time of the Universal Aero Kit when that came out, and just in case you don't know what my thoughts were on that at the time, I'll give them to you here, is that yes, I thought it was a very crowd-pleasing thing to go with something that looked a lot like kart. Obviously, that's what the fans have wanted since the merger, and they finally delivered on that. The one thing that I really thought was a little bit problematic about that move was that, here you are 10 years post-merger, and you're going back 10 years in time, in theoretically, or at least from a optics standpoint, you're going back 10 years technologically. And that's cool if you are truly thinking, okay, we are entertainment, we're here to please the crowds, and that's all we're really doing. And I think it's worked in a very limited capacity, which is the attendance at a lot of the legacy racetracks. You look at Mid-Ohio, or you look at Gateway, and you even look at the Indianapolis 500, and the attendance has been very, very good. A lot of people like that nostalgia of going back to the track and seeing beautiful race cars. What ultimately, I think where the mistake has been made, in my opinion, is that I think the people, and again, I don't want to make observation or accusations, but this is something that I have a suspicion about, is that I wonder if there's a thought in management that they say, okay, the fans like kart, and the last time we made a lot of money and we were very successful was kart. So let's make everything as much like kart as we can for the fans, but at the same time, we don't want to do anything too crazy to piss the manufacturers off. So what they kind of came up with was, all right, we're going to go with a body kit that looks as much like a kart car as we can get away with. And then we are going to market that we are going to have 900 horsepower engines, but at the same time, we're going to change the formula only very, very slightly. We're going to go up from like 2.4 liters to 2.6 liters, bore the engine out just a little bit, but keep the same twin turbocharged V6 formula that Chevy and Honda are comfortable with. And then hopefully we'll be able to pitch another manufacturer in on this, and that has not worked out for them, as we've seen. And that's why I think this hybrid has been integrated, thrown into this mix, is because suddenly, they tried to have their cake and eat it too. It was like, we want manufacturers, but we also want to be entertaining. And to be honest with you, I think IndyCar is going to have to make a choice sooner rather than later, whether or not they are entertainment, or whether or not they are a sport that is trying to push development of the auto industry forward. Are they trying to actually be innovative? Do they want manufacturers to come in? Or do you want it to be something that is just solely for entertainment purposes, where you have very crowd-pleasing race cars that everybody goes home happy with? Rather than maybe some of the team owners and some of the league officials who could come home very happy with big-time manufacturer purses, a la Formula E. And, that's the thing, is that this is my suggestion, is that if you want to go down the entertainment road, if that's really what you want to do, if you really want to please the crowd, create a race car that is just absolutely everybody's dream. 1,000 horsepower, V12, beautiful race car, and try to lower the cost. Make it totally spec. And this is coming from me, so it's a genuine suggestion when I'm making it, saying everything should be spec, because it's already almost spec. What's the point of having manufacturers if you don't let them do a whole lot? So, that's the thing, is that make it super, super low cost, but a super, super awesome race car, and then just make it totally about the show, the spectacle, the drivers, and make it that way. Or you can go the opposite direction and go totally in the Formula E direction, where maybe even further, where you can say, hey, if you want to bring an electric car, if you want to bring a hydrogen-powered car, you want to bring a nuclear submarine to go to the Indy 500, do it. That's the other direction you could go. And doing this middle of the road thing, it's not working, because ultimately the thought process of having a twin turbocharged V6, even with a small hybrid system, I think Marshall Pruitt reported it was somewhere around 50 horsepower. It's not very forward thinking, and I don't think it's going to attract a lot of manufacturers. And is it going to make Porsche come back? Probably not. I'd love to be wrong on this, but that's just kind of what I suspect is going on. And then I kind of want to debunk as well the whole 900 horsepower thing. Like I just said, Marshall Pruitt said 50 horsepower coming from the hybrid system. And so that really, with 100 horsepower, as I think they're looking at for push to pass, is about 750 horsepower for the base engine. That's not much more than they are currently using on the road courses, and they're certainly not going to use 900 on the ovals. That's for darn sure. I don't think they really let them over 600 horsepower on the ovals. Obviously, the short ovals, they let them have the road course boost, which is somewhere around 700 horsepower. But Indianapolis, no, they're going to be nowhere close to 900 horsepower there. So, yeah, that's that is what it is. I don't want to. I don't want to be one of those people who's kind of perpetuating the myth that the track record is going to get smashed by 5 miles an hour and they're going to go 245. No, they're going to keep them around 229 because that's where they feel safe, and I'm sure that's where their insurance company feels safe. It is what it is. Yeah, I mean, again, I don't want to be too negative here. It is a step forward, so I commend them for that. but it really does feel like this is something that they should have gone with in 2012, and I think they would have probably gotten the desired result. But they look so much to the past, and that would have worked around 2008. It's now 2019, and they're writing regulations for 2022, and seeing how long IndyCar regulations have gone in recent years, this is a regulation set that's going to be in place for 10 plus years. Do we really think that a small hybrid with a twin turbocharged V6 is going to be A, sustainable, or B, something that manufacturers are interested in 2033? This is kind of my point, is that I've kind of like, this makes me scratch my head a little bit. I hope there's a little more foresight put into this, and I also hope that, you know, some manufacturers do like this and do want to sign up, but the window is closing very quickly. You know, we're almost to 2020, and 2 years to develop an engine to go racing against Chevy and Honda when they have, you know, they already essentially have been working towards 2021 for God knows how long, and now they're going to have to integrate a hybrid system into that. But a lot of the work has already been done, I'm sure, at HPD and Ilmor. So another manufacturer is going to have to come in against an already formidable opponent in a very short amount of time. It's very hard to see that this is going to work out for them, but again, I hope it does. So thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know what you think about IndyCar hybrids down in the comment section below. This has been David Land on YouTube. I got more content coming specifically about the IndyCar silly season, so you'll want to stick around for that. And we'll see you in the next